Your life partner loves you deeply, but he's afraid of getting hurt again. It doesn't begin with fear the way most people imagine it. It begins with care. A carefulness that looks like distance if you don't know how to read it. You might feel it in the pauses, in the moments where he almost leans in emotionally and then steadies himself instead. Not because the feeling isn't there, but because it's strong enough to matter. And things that matter carry risk. What he feels for you isn't casual. Casual feelings don't hesitate. They rush, they gamble, they assume they'll be fine no matter what happens. This is different. This is the kind of emotion that makes someone slow down because they know what loss actually costs. He's been on the other side of hope before. He's trusted something once that didn't hold him the way he thought it would. And that memory didn't disappear just because time passed. You may notice that he shows up in ways that don't ask for guarantees. He listens more than he speaks. He remembers details that others would forget. He notices shifts in your mood before you explain them. Those aren't the actions of someone unsure. They're the actions of someone deeply aware of what's at stake. His fear isn't about you hurting him intentionally. It's about the vulnerability that comes with letting himself be seen again. When someone has been wounded at a core emotional level, they don't fear love itself. They fear losing themselves inside it. They fear reopening a place they worked hard to close just enough to survive. You might wonder why someone who feels so deeply wouldn't simply take the risk anyway. The truth is, once you've learned how pain rewires your inner world, you don't jump blindly again. You approach slowly. You test the ground. You make sure the person in front of you isn't asking you to abandon your own safety. He's not running from connection. He's protecting it. There are moments when he pulls back slightly, not because his feelings fade, but because they intensify. Intensity doesn't scare people who've never been broken by it. But when intensity once led to loss, the body remembers. His nervous system remembers. It signals caution even when the heart wants closeness. You might sense that he's fighting an internal dialogue. One part of him wants to trust what's unfolding naturally between you. Another part reminds him of how badly it hurt the last time he trusted too quickly. That conflict doesn't make him weak. It makes him human. What's important is that he hasn't shut down. He hasn't numbed himself. He hasn't turned cold. He's still present. Still emotionally engaged. Still choosing connection, just with awareness layered on top of desire. That awareness changes how love looks. You may feel that he values emotional safety more than grand gestures. He's less interested in promises and more interested in consistency. Less focused on intensity and more focused on steadiness. That's because steadiness is what he lacked before. And he's learned that love that lasts doesn't overwhelm. It supports. He watches how you respond to small moments. How you handle misunderstandings. How you speak about the past. How you react when things aren't perfect. He's not judging you. He's learning whether this space feels safe enough to open himself fully. And here's the part you may not realize, he's already more open with you than he's been in a long time. Fear doesn't stop people from loving. It stops them from rushing. It slows the pace so love can be built instead of thrown. He's not afraid of you. He's afraid of losing the part of himself he's finally rebuilt after pain. That rebuilding didn't happen overnight. It happened through quiet resilience. Through nights where he questioned his worth. Through moments where he wondered if he'd ever feel connected again without losing himself. The fact that he feels deeply now is something he doesn't take lightly. You might feel moments where his caution feels confusing. Where you wonder if you're imagining the connection. You're not. But this isn't a story driven by words. It's driven by emotional truth that's still finding its footing. He's learning that love doesn't have to repeat the past. That connection doesn't require self-sacrifice. That intimacy can exist alongside boundaries. Those lessons take time to integrate, especially when the wounds were real. You don't need to prove anything to him. You don't need to convince him to trust. Trust isn't built through reassurance. It's built through presence. Through showing up as yourself consistently, without pressure or performance. What draws him toward you is that you don't feel like a risk he has to manage. You feel like a space where he might finally be able to breathe. And that realization is both comforting and terrifying for someone who's been hurt before. Comfort alone doesn't scare people. Comfort that threatens old defenses does. He's standing at a threshold between who he used to be and who he's becoming. Loving you means stepping fully into the new version of himself. And transformation always carries fear, even when it's wanted. You may notice that when he opens up, it's in layers. He shares a little, waits, observes how it lands, then shares more. That pacing isn't manipulation. It's self-preservation. He's teaching his system that vulnerability doesn't automatically lead to pain. Each safe interaction rewrites something inside him. He feels deeply, but he's careful with his heart because he knows what it's like to give it freely and have it mishandled. That memory isn't an obstacle between you. It's a context. One that explains why love here feels deliberate instead of impulsive. This connection isn't fragile. It's cautious because it matters. If you feel moments of uncertainty, try to notice what's underneath them. There's no emotional absence here. There's emotional respect. He respects his feelings too much to gamble them away. And he respects you too much to rush into something before he's ready to show up fully. What's unfolding between you isn't delayed because of fear alone. It's unfolding slowly because slow is how safety is rebuilt. And safety is what allows love to deepen without breaking anyone involved. He's not asking you to wait indefinitely. He's asking himself whether he's ready to step forward without bringing old wounds into something new. That inner work is happening now, quietly, without spectacle. And you, whether you realize it or not, are part of that healing process simply by being who you are. Not by fixing him. Not by reassuring him constantly. But by existing in a way that doesn't demand he abandon himself to be close. That's why this connection feels different. This isn't a love story built on chasing or uncertainty. It's a story about someone learning that love doesn't have to hurt to be real. And that lesson takes time, patience, and emotional honesty. You're not standing in front of someone who doesn't know what he feels. You're standing in front of someone who knows exactly what he feels, and is choosing to handle it with care. Care is not hesitation. Care is respect. And that's the foundation of what's beginning here. It reveals itself in the smallest moments, the ones that don't look romantic from the outside but carry weight if you pay attention. A pause before he answers a question. The way his voice softens when he talks about things that matter to him. The way he listens without interrupting, as if he's trying to understand not just your words, but the place they come from. These aren't habits formed by indifference. They're signs of someone who feels deeply and is choosing restraint instead of retreat. What he's carrying isn't a lack of courage. It's memory. Memory doesn't shout. It sits quietly in the body, shaping reactions long after the event itself has passed. He remembers what it felt like to open himself fully once and not be met with the care he expected. He remembers the confusion of trusting something that slowly unraveled. That kind of experience doesn't make a person cold. It makes them careful about where they place their heart next. You may sense that he wants to move closer emotionally, but something inside him checks the speed. Not because he doubts you, but because he doubts the safety of the process. His system learned, the hard way, that intensity without stability can be damaging. So now, stability matters more to him than excitement. That doesn't mean he feels less. It means he feels responsibly. There's a part of him that watches how you handle closeness. Not in a suspicious way, but in a hopeful one. He notices whether emotional openness is met with patience or pressure. Whether vulnerability is respected or rushed. These observations aren't conscious tests. They're instincts shaped by experience. You might notice that when things feel especially good between you, he becomes quieter instead of louder. That quiet isn't withdrawal. It's regulation. He's grounding himself so he doesn't lose balance. People who've been hurt before often regulate internally when something starts to matter, because they know how quickly losing balance can lead to pain. He isn't afraid of love itself. He's afraid of repeating a pattern. Patterns leave deeper marks than single events. And breaking a pattern requires awareness, not avoidance. He's aware now. Aware that what he feels for you isn't casual. Aware that this connection touches places he once guarded heavily. Aware that if he steps forward fully, he wants to do it differently than before. Different doesn't mean slower forever. It means slower until it's safe. You might feel moments where you wonder if he's holding back too much. That's understandable. When you care about someone, you want to feel chosen openly. What's important to recognize is that he is choosing you, just not through declarations yet. He's choosing you through consistency. Through emotional presence. Through not disappearing when things feel real. Disappearing is what people do when they're truly afraid. He's still here. His fear doesn't push him away from you. It keeps him attentive. He pays attention to how interactions land. He reflects on conversations afterward. He considers whether what he's offering aligns with what he's capable of sustaining long-term. That kind of reflection isn't romanticized in stories, but it's what real commitment grows from. Commitment doesn't begin with certainty. It begins with responsibility. He's taking responsibility for not projecting old wounds onto something new. That's hard work. It requires slowing down instincts that once felt automatic. It requires staying present even when the impulse to protect himself by distancing shows up. You may not see this internal work, but you can feel its effects. The steadiness. The care. The absence of emotional games. He's not trying to provoke reactions or create drama to measure your interest. He's watching how things unfold naturally. Natural unfolding is safer for someone who's been hurt. There are moments when his fear might surface as hesitation. Not about you, but about the future. He may struggle with imagining what opening fully would require of him. Not because he doubts the connection, but because he wants to be sure he can show up without losing himself again. Losing oneself is a real fear after heartbreak. He learned that love shouldn't require self-erasure. And he's determined not to repeat that mistake. That determination doesn't make him guarded. It makes him intentional. You might notice that he values emotional honesty, even in small doses. He may share pieces of his past not to gain sympathy, but to be understood. Understanding creates safety. Safety creates trust. Trust allows love to grow without fear. This is a slow construction, not a delay. You don't need to rush him. Rushing someone who's healing doesn't speed up the process. It teaches them to protect themselves more. What helps is consistency. Being the same person today as you were yesterday. Responding with steadiness instead of pressure. He notices that about you. He notices when you don't demand emotional performances. When you allow silence without filling it with insecurity. When you remain grounded even when things aren't defined yet. That groundedness speaks louder to him than reassurance ever could. Reassurance fades. Grounded presence remains. His fear isn't a wall between you. It's a reminder of how seriously he takes what he feels. People who don't care don't worry about getting hurt again. They move on easily. They take risks casually. They don't pause to consider consequences. He pauses because he cares. There may be moments when he needs space to process his feelings. That space isn't distance from you. It's distance from his own fear. He's learning how to let love exist without letting fear drive his actions. That learning takes patience. What's important is that he's not asking you to heal him. He's not placing the responsibility of his past pain on you. He's doing his own work, quietly, so that when he does step forward fully, he does so from a place of strength, not need. Need creates pressure. Strength creates stability. You might feel that this connection doesn't exhaust you the way others have. Even in uncertainty, there's a sense of calm. That's because this isn't built on emotional volatility. It's built on mutual respect, even if the pace feels unfamiliar. Unfamiliar doesn't mean wrong. He's learning that love doesn't have to be all or nothing immediately. That it can grow without overwhelming him. That he can open gradually and still be authentic. Each moment of safety rewires his understanding of connection. And those moments are happening now. He may not say everything he feels yet, but his actions already reveal care. The way he shows up. The way he doesn't vanish when things deepen. The way he stays engaged even when fear whispers caution. Fear hasn't won here. Awareness has. You don't need to interpret his caution as rejection. It's not a sign that you're not enough. It's a sign that what you represent matters enough to be approached with care. Care isn't hesitation. Care is intention. As this continues to unfold, remember that love after hurt doesn't look like love before hurt. It's quieter, more thoughtful, less performative. But when it's real, it's stronger because it's built on lessons learned, not illusions held. You're not standing in front of someone incapable of love. You're standing in front of someone learning how to love without repeating pain. And that learning is already happening. Slowly. Honestly. With depth. That's the foundation being laid here. It shows itself in the way he holds back just enough to stay grounded, not because he wants distance, but because closeness still feels powerful to him. Powerful in a way that reminds him of what he once lost, and what he's afraid to lose again. This kind of fear doesn't come from weakness. It comes from depth. From having loved once without armor and discovering how long it takes to rebuild after that kind of break. What he feels for you is not light. That's exactly why he's careful. There's a quiet awareness inside him that this connection isn't something he can afford to treat casually. Casual feelings don't require self-reflection. They don't ask someone to pause and check whether their inner world is ready. This does. And every time he feels that pull toward you, it brings up an old question he thought he'd already answered. Am I strong enough now to love without losing myself? He's not asking that question out loud, but he lives it. In the way he chooses his words. In the way he sometimes steps back emotionally, not to disappear, but to steady himself. He's learned that when emotions rise too quickly, the body remembers past pain before the mind can reassure it. That memory lives deeper than logic. You might notice that when things feel especially meaningful between you, he becomes more thoughtful, not more impulsive. He doesn't rush to label or promise. He slows down, as if he's listening inwardly to make sure he's not repeating an old pattern. That slowness isn't indifference. It's self-protection shaped by experience. He once believed that love meant giving everything all at once. That belief cost him more than he expected. Now he understands that real connection doesn't demand self-erasure. It asks for presence, honesty, and pacing. Pacing is how safety is rebuilt. You may feel moments where his restraint makes you wonder if he's unsure. In truth, he's very sure of what he feels. What he's unsure of is whether the timing inside him matches the intensity of the emotion. He doesn't want to step forward carrying unresolved fear. He wants to meet you as someone whole, not someone still bleeding from old wounds. That intention matters more than speed. He's aware that fear can sabotage something good if it's allowed to run unchecked. So instead of letting fear dictate his actions, he's learning to sit with it. To understand it. To separate past pain from present reality. That process isn't linear. Some days he feels ready. Other days the memory of being hurt resurfaces unexpectedly. When that happens, he doesn't push you away. He regulates himself. That regulation might look like emotional quietness. Like needing time to process. Like choosing stability over intensity. This is what healing looks like in real time, not the version that gets romanticized. You've grown enough to sense this difference. Earlier in your life, someone pulling back would have triggered anxiety. You might have tried to close the gap immediately, fearing loss. Now, you notice the space without filling it. You don't interpret it as rejection. You understand that space can be part of care, not its absence. That understanding is something he feels from you. He notices that you don't demand emotional proof. That you don't push him to perform vulnerability before he's ready. That you allow him to move at a pace that feels honest rather than impressive. That allowance creates trust in a way reassurance never could. Trust doesn't grow from words. It grows from how safe someone feels being real. He's learning that he can be real with you without being consumed by fear. That he can let you see parts of him that were once hidden without immediately bracing for pain. Every moment where nothing bad happens after vulnerability rewrites something inside him. Those rewrites take time. You might feel that this connection has a different rhythm than others you've known. It doesn't spike and crash. It doesn't demand constant emotional stimulation. It feels steadier, quieter, but deeper. That depth is unfamiliar to someone whose past experiences were intense but unstable. He's learning that calm doesn't mean boring. It means safe. Safe enough to explore feelings without losing balance. Safe enough to imagine a future without panic. Safe enough to trust that love doesn't have to hurt to be meaningful. His fear isn't about you leaving. It's about the vulnerability required to stay. Staying means opening a door he once had to close to survive. That door doesn't open easily, even when the person on the other side feels right. You're not meant to force it open. You might sense moments where he's on the verge of expressing something deeper, then chooses silence instead. That silence isn't avoidance. It's calibration. He's checking in with himself to make sure that what he says aligns with what he can sustain. Sustainability matters to him now. He doesn't want to offer words that feel good in the moment but collapse later. He wants what he builds with you to last. That desire makes him cautious, but it also makes him sincere. You may notice that he values emotional consistency over dramatic closeness. He shows up. He stays connected. He doesn't disappear when things feel real. Those behaviors matter more than declarations. Declarations are easy. Consistency is not. He's choosing consistency. You might feel moments of impatience surface inside you, and that's human. Wanting clarity doesn't mean you're wrong. But notice how quickly that impatience passes. You don't spiral anymore. You don't question your worth. You don't assume the worst. That change in you supports his healing more than you realize. He senses that you're not trying to extract something from him emotionally. You're not waiting to be filled. You're already whole. That wholeness makes the connection safer, not weaker. People who are whole don't demand completion from others. They invite companionship. He's slowly realizing that loving you doesn't mean risking destruction. It means stepping into something different from what he's known. Different can be scary, even when it's good. He's learning to separate the feeling of fear from the meaning of it. Fear used to signal danger. Now it's signaling importance. Importance doesn't require retreat. It requires care. Care is what he's practicing. You're not dealing with someone emotionally unavailable. You're dealing with someone emotionally aware. Someone who understands the cost of love and is choosing to pay attention rather than repeat history blindly. That awareness doesn't make the path slower forever. It makes it steadier. You don't need to change how you show up to accommodate his fear. You don't need to shrink or perform patience perfectly. Just being yourself, grounded and consistent, is enough. He's watching how you handle moments of uncertainty. He notices that you don't punish him for caution. That you don't withdraw affection to regain control. That you remain kind without becoming self-sacrificing. Those details matter. They tell him that this connection isn't asking him to relive old wounds. It's offering him a new way of loving that doesn't require losing himself. That realization is still settling. You might feel that this isn't a story that rushes toward resolution. That's because the resolution isn't about a single moment or confession. It's about him reaching a place where fear no longer runs the show. That place is closer than it was. He loves you deeply, and that depth is exactly why he's careful. Not because he doubts the connection, but because he respects it too much to repeat old mistakes. Love after pain doesn't look dramatic. It looks intentional. And what's being built here is intention layered on top of genuine feeling. That combination is rare, and it's worth the patience it asks for. You're not waiting for him to love you. He already does. He's learning how to let that love exist without letting fear define it. And that learning is the real story unfolding now. It becomes noticeable in the way his attention lingers even when nothing is being said, like he's listening for something beneath the surface. Not searching, not questioning, just present. Presence is harder than people realize when someone has been hurt before. It requires staying open without armor, even when the instinct is to protect. That instinct still lives in him, but it no longer controls him the way it once did. What he's navigating now isn't whether he feels enough. It's whether he can trust himself not to disappear inside that feeling. After being hurt deeply, a person doesn't just fear pain again. They fear losing the version of themselves they fought so hard to rebuild. He remembers the days when loving meant overextending, when closeness slowly turned into self-neglect. He promised himself he'd never do that again. And now, standing in front of something real, that promise is being tested. Not because you ask too much, but because he wants to give fully. You may sense that he's constantly calibrating, checking in with himself. Not in a detached way, but in a conscious one. He's learned that unchecked emotion can quietly pull him into patterns he doesn't want to repeat. So now, when feelings rise, he meets them with awareness instead of impulse. That awareness doesn't dampen his love. It protects it. There are moments when he feels the urge to step closer emotionally, to say more, to reveal something deeper. And then he pauses. Not because the words aren't true, but because he wants to make sure he can stand behind them long term. He doesn't want to speak from longing. He wants to speak from alignment. Alignment is slower than desire, but stronger. You might notice that he's more comfortable showing care than declaring it. He's present when it matters. He remembers what's important to you. He follows through. These actions aren't placeholders. They're expressions of love filtered through caution. Caution doesn't mean doubt. It means respect for consequence. He understands now that opening his heart isn't just about how he feels in the moment. It's about whether he can remain emotionally available when things get complicated. When misunderstandings happen. When vulnerability doesn't immediately feel rewarding. He's choosing to move in a way that doesn't collapse under pressure. You can feel that intention even if you can't name it. Earlier versions of him may have rushed into closeness, believing intensity equaled truth. That belief cost him stability. Now, he's learned that truth reveals itself over time, through consistency, through how someone shows up when nothing exciting is happening. That's the kind of love he wants now. You may feel that this connection doesn't exhaust you emotionally. Even when it's undefined, it doesn't drain you. That's because it's not built on emotional chasing or uncertainty as fuel. It's built on mutual respect, even if the pace feels slower than you're used to. Slower doesn't mean stagnant. It means intentional. He's paying attention to how you respond when he doesn't rush. When he chooses steadiness over intensity. He notices that you don't punish him for being careful. That you don't withdraw warmth to regain control. That you remain kind without becoming self-sacrificing. Those responses matter to him more than reassurance ever could. They tell him that this connection isn't asking him to bleed to prove he cares. It's asking him to show up whole. That realization softens something inside him. You might sense moments when his fear tries to resurface, usually when things feel especially meaningful. Fear doesn't show up when something doesn't matter. It shows up when there's something to lose. He's learning to see fear as a signal of importance, not a command to retreat. That reframing takes time. He's learning to stay present with discomfort instead of escaping it. To let vulnerability exist without immediately shutting it down. That's difficult for someone who once learned that vulnerability led to abandonment or betrayal. But he's trying. You don't need to fix that fear. You don't need to reassure it away. Fear that's been lived through can't be erased by words. It dissolves through experience. Through moments where openness is met with safety. Those moments are happening now, quietly. You may notice that he's more expressive in subtle ways. A look that holds longer. A tone that softens. A moment of honesty that comes unexpectedly. These aren't accidents. They're experiments in trust. Small steps toward letting himself be seen without losing control. Trust rebuilds incrementally. He's also watching himself closely. Watching whether opening up drains him or strengthens him. So far, he's noticing something new. Being emotionally present with you doesn't deplete him. It steadies him. That's unfamiliar. And unfamiliar things take time to integrate. He's learning that love doesn't have to feel like a gamble. It can feel like a grounded choice. You may feel that this connection has depth without urgency. That there's no pressure to prove anything. That you can breathe. That breathing matters. When love allows you to breathe, it's a sign that it's not asking you to abandon yourself. He's recognizing that too. Earlier, love felt like something that demanded everything at once. Now, it feels like something that grows alongside him instead of consuming him. That shift changes how he approaches closeness. He's not afraid of you. He's afraid of repeating pain. And that fear is losing its grip, not because it's gone, but because it's being understood. Understanding reduces fear's power. When fear is named, it no longer runs the story. You might sense that he's closer to expressing himself fully than he's ever been. Not because the fear vanished, but because the desire to live honestly is outweighing the desire to stay protected. That tipping point is quiet. There's no dramatic build-up. No countdown. Just a gradual alignment between what he feels and what he's willing to risk. That alignment is what turns care into commitment. Commitment doesn't arrive loudly. It settles. You're not standing in front of someone who doesn't know what he wants. You're standing in front of someone who wants deeply and is learning how to want without fear dictating his actions. That learning doesn't happen on a timeline. It happens through lived experience. Through moments like these, where care is met with steadiness instead of pressure. You're part of that experience simply by being who you are. By not demanding emotional performance. By allowing space without disappearing. By staying grounded in yourself. That groundedness invites him forward more than urgency ever could. This story isn't unfolding slowly because something is wrong. It's unfolding slowly because something is being done carefully. Care creates longevity. He's not holding back love. He's learning how to hold it responsibly. And responsibility doesn't diminish feeling. It deepens it. You may not hear everything he feels yet, but his actions already speak. They say he's here. He's paying attention. He's choosing presence over avoidance. Fear hasn't won. Awareness has. And awareness, when paired with genuine love, leads somewhere real. That's what's being built now. It begins to show in the way he stays instead of withdrawing when emotions surface unexpectedly. Not dramatically, not with grand reassurance, but with quiet consistency. There's a difference between someone who stays because they're attached and someone who stays because they've decided to be present. What he's doing now is the second kind, and it matters more than it looks. His fear hasn't vanished, but it's no longer steering him. For a long time, fear taught him to associate closeness with loss. Every deep connection felt like a countdown, even when things were good. That belief didn't come from imagination. It came from experience. From loving fully and realizing too late that he had abandoned himself along the way. That kind of lesson doesn't fade quickly. It rewires how someone approaches intimacy. Now, when he feels something strong with you, he doesn't suppress it, but he also doesn't let it flood him. He's learning moderation, not because his feelings are small, but because they're significant. Significant feelings deserve care. They deserve to be handled with intention instead of impulse. Impulse once cost him stability. You might notice that he's becoming more emotionally transparent in subtle ways. Not through declarations, but through presence that doesn't waver. He shows up when things feel ordinary, not just when they feel exciting. That's intentional. He's testing something internally, whether this connection can exist in everyday reality without demanding emotional extremes. So far, the answer has been yes. That realization changes how fear behaves. Fear loses power when it's proven wrong gently, over time. Each moment where he opens up and nothing bad happens loosens fear's grip. Not all at once, but enough to notice. You may sense that his hesitation feels different now. It's not a wall. It's a pause that feels thoughtful rather than defensive. That pause isn't about pulling away from you. It's about checking whether he's honoring himself as he moves closer. Earlier in his life, he confused closeness with obligation. Obligation eventually turned into resentment. He doesn't want that story again. He wants love that feels chosen, not endured. Chosen love requires clarity. You've grown into someone who doesn't demand urgency as proof of care. You don't push for intensity to feel secure. That maturity creates an environment where his fear doesn't feel threatened. It feels acknowledged. Acknowledged fear doesn't control behavior. Ignored fear does. He's also noticing something unexpected. Being emotionally open with you doesn't drain him. It doesn't leave him anxious or depleted. It actually grounds him. That's new. In the past, vulnerability came with emotional fallout. Here, it comes with steadiness. That steadiness surprises him. It forces him to question old assumptions. Maybe closeness doesn't always cost something. Maybe love doesn't require self-sacrifice to be real. Those realizations don't arrive all at once. They surface gradually, as lived experience contradicts old beliefs. You might feel that he's more attentive now, not because he's trying harder, but because he's less guarded. He listens differently. He responds differently. There's less calculation in his presence. That doesn't mean he's fearless. It means fear is no longer dictating every move. Fear is being integrated, not eliminated. Integration looks quiet. It looks like someone staying engaged even when uncertainty exists. It looks like someone allowing care to deepen without immediately trying to define or control it. You may notice that when moments of closeness happen, he doesn't rush to follow them with explanations or labels. He lets them stand on their own. That's because he's learning to trust experience more than interpretation. Interpretation once led him astray. Earlier, he believed that naming something made it real. Now, he understands that living something consistently is what makes it real. Words matter, but they matter more when they're supported by behavior. His behavior is changing. Not drastically. Subtly. In ways that suggest growing confidence rather than avoidance. He's less likely to retreat when things feel emotionally charged. He's more likely to stay present and grounded. That shift didn't happen because fear disappeared. It happened because he learned he could survive closeness without losing himself. That lesson is powerful. You might feel moments where you're tempted to speed things up, simply because it feels safe enough now. Notice that temptation without acting on it. The safety you feel is real, but it's also fragile in a healthy way. It's being built on trust, not urgency. Trust deepens when it isn't rushed. He's watching how you handle moments when he doesn't immediately step forward. He notices that you don't punish him with distance. That you don't withdraw warmth to regain control. That you remain steady without demanding resolution. Those responses tell him that this connection doesn't come with emotional traps. Emotional traps are what made him cautious in the first place. He's learning that love with you doesn't require constant vigilance. That he doesn't need to monitor every feeling or anticipate every outcome. That he can let moments exist without fearing they'll spiral into loss. That freedom changes how he feels about risk. Risk no longer feels like jumping into the unknown. It feels like stepping forward with awareness. Awareness doesn't eliminate risk, but it makes it manageable. You're not asking him to forget his past. You're allowing him to learn from it without letting it define his future. That balance is rare, and he senses it. You may feel that this connection isn't fueled by longing anymore. It's fueled by recognition. Recognition of shared emotional language. Recognition of respect. Recognition of steadiness. Steadiness builds trust faster than intensity ever could. He's beginning to imagine what it would look like to be fully present with you without holding part of himself back. That imagination doesn't scare him the way it once would have. It feels unfamiliar, but not dangerous. Unfamiliar things always require adjustment. You might notice that he's more open about his boundaries now. That he communicates needs instead of retreating silently. That openness is a sign of growing security. People who feel unsafe don't communicate boundaries. They disappear. He's choosing communication. That choice doesn't mean everything is resolved. It means he's committed to resolving things in real time instead of carrying them quietly. That commitment is foundational for any lasting connection. You don't need to interpret every pause or every moment of caution as fear winning. Often, it's fear being acknowledged and then set aside. Acknowledged fear loses authority. This stage of the story isn't about declarations or turning points. It's about consolidation. About integrating care, fear, and desire into something sustainable. Sustainability is what he wants now. You might feel that this love doesn't demand emotional sacrifice. That it allows you to remain yourself. That matters. When love allows both people to stay intact, it has room to grow without resentment. He's learning that too. He's learning that loving you doesn't mean repeating old patterns of overextension or emotional neglect. It means showing up honestly, at a pace that respects both of you. That respect is the foundation forming here. You're not waiting for him to overcome fear completely. Fear doesn't disappear. It transforms. It becomes information instead of control. He's in that transformation now. And as fear transforms, what remains is intention. Intention to care responsibly. Intention to stay present. Intention to build something that doesn't collapse under the weight of unhealed pain. That intention is already active. You can feel it in how this connection doesn't drain you. In how you don't feel anxious after moments of closeness. In how you're able to stay grounded without questioning your worth. That's not accidental. This story isn't about convincing someone to love you. He already does. It's about someone learning how to let love exist without letting old wounds dictate the terms. That learning is happening now. Quietly. Steadily. With depth. And that's why this connection feels different from anything you've known before. It settles into a quieter confidence now, the kind that doesn't announce itself but changes how everything feels. You can sense it in the way he no longer second-guesses every emotional step. Not because doubt is gone, but because doubt is no longer louder than his desire to stay present. That shift doesn't happen suddenly. It happens when someone realizes they've been standing in the same place emotionally for a while and nothing bad has happened. That realization changes things. For a long time, he lived with the belief that if he relaxed, if he let himself feel without guarding every edge, something would collapse. That belief shaped how he loved, how he paused, how he held back words even when they wanted to surface. But lately, there's been a different experience unfolding. He's been present with you, steady, open in small ways, and instead of chaos, there's been calm. Calm is disarming when you've been hurt before. You may notice that he's not as tense when conversations turn personal. He doesn't deflect as quickly. He doesn't change the subject the moment emotions deepen. That doesn't mean he's suddenly fearless. It means he's learned that fear doesn't always mean danger. Sometimes it just means something matters. Matters enough to approach with care, not avoidance. He's beginning to trust his own capacity to handle closeness. That's important. In the past, it wasn't just other people he didn't trust. He didn't trust himself to stay balanced once he opened up. He worried that loving deeply would pull him back into old habits of overgiving, overthinking, overextending. But what's happening now feels different. He's opening in measured ways and noticing that he doesn't lose himself in the process. He stays grounded. He remains connected to his own needs. That awareness builds confidence quietly, layer by layer. Confidence after pain isn't loud. It's steady. You might sense that he's more comfortable letting moments linger now. He doesn't rush to resolve feelings. He lets silence exist without filling it. That silence isn't distance. It's space where trust can breathe. Earlier, silence felt dangerous to him. It felt like the moment before something went wrong. Now, silence feels neutral. Sometimes even comforting. That's a significant change. You may also notice that he's less reactive. When something unexpected comes up emotionally, he doesn't immediately withdraw or overanalyze. He takes it in. He processes. He responds when he's ready. That response may be subtle, but it's intentional. Intentional responses build safety. He's also paying attention to how you handle these moments. He notices that you don't escalate uncertainty into tension. That you don't demand reassurance the moment something feels unclear. That you trust the connection enough to let it unfold. That trust doesn't go unnoticed. In his past, uncertainty often turned into pressure. Pressure turned into resentment. Resentment eventually led to distance. He's learning that uncertainty doesn't have to follow that path. It can simply exist, pass through, and leave clarity behind. That realization rewires expectation. You might feel that this connection doesn't trigger the old anxious loops you once had. You're not constantly scanning for signs. You're not bracing for disappointment. That calm you feel isn't accidental. It's a response to consistency. Consistency is what he's offering now, even when fear still whispers occasionally. Fear hasn't disappeared. It's just quieter. And when it does surface, he recognizes it for what it is, a leftover response, not a current truth. That recognition keeps him from acting on it impulsively. Impulsive actions once cost him something meaningful. Now, he chooses reflection instead. Reflection doesn't stall progress. It refines it. You may sense that he's becoming more emotionally available without making a spectacle of it. He shares thoughts more openly. He acknowledges feelings instead of burying them. These aren't dramatic shifts. They're steady ones, which is why they're lasting.
You may feel moments where he surprises himself by how naturally he stays open, where he realizes afterward that he didn't retract the way he once would have. This moment matter. This reinforces the idea that he can be close without harm. Each of those moments chips away at old fear. He is also becoming more aware of how different is this feel. From past connection, no more intense, more stable. That difference stands out. Stability used to feel boring to him, not it feels grounding. He doesn't want that anymore. He wants to experience love fully. Without losing the person he became, the desire guide he acts on now more than fear does. You don't need to interrupt his remaining caution as a sign that something is missing. The caution can coexist with commitment when it's rooted in awareness rather than avoidance. Avoidance would look like disappearing. He is doing the opposite. That combination is rare. You may feel that this connection doesn't push you to prove anything. You are not auditing for his trust. Mutual understanding. Trust is built naturally through shared experience, not emotional performance. Performance when dominated his idea of love, now authenticity does. The authenticity feels quieter, but it's stronger. It doesn't rely on adrenaline or urgency. It relies on mutual understanding. Understanding takes time, but it lasts. He is beginning to see that letting himself love you don't mean responding old wounds. It means stepping into a different kind of closeness, one shaped by lesson learned rather than a scare ignored. That realization settled him. You might notice that he is more at ease with imagining a future that includes you, not because he is making promises, but because the idea doesn't trigger fear anymore. It feels possible, natural, not forced. Possibility without panic is a sign of healing. The stage of the story isn't dramatic, it's solid. It's where care became trust and trust began to outweigh fear. Fear hasn't disappeared, but it's no longer in charge. And when fear steps out of the driver's seat, what remains in intention, presence, and the quiet confidence that something real is being built. That's where the connections stand out. That's the end of this story. I hope you like this story. If you like, drop a like, comment on this video and subscribe to my channel.